An ordinary flight turns into a fight for survival. When a violent storm tears an aircraft from the sky, two strangers, a young woman and a teenage boy, find themselves stranded in the desert with only 2 days' worth of food, no compass, and injuries that make every step a battle. As the heat burns by day and the cold bites by night, their only hope lies beyond the dunes, if they can survive long enough to reach it. The airplane cut across the endless sky, its wings glinting under the harsh desert sun. Through the window, the desert floor rushed closer, its surface blurred by sheets of wind-blown sand. Somewhere behind them, a suitcase broke loose and tumbled down the aisle, smashing into a row of seats. Overhead compartments burst open, raining down luggage. A baby cried somewhere to the left. The captain attempted a hard landing, but the uneven ground betrayed him. The wheels struck the sand, jolting the passengers violently forward. A deafening crack came from the right wing as it tore against the rocky desert floor. Sparks shot out, briefly lighting the storm in a flash of orange. The fuselage slammed to the ground. The tail scraped against a dune before snapping upward and slamming back down. The cabin tilted, tossing passengers sideways. Screams echoed as the rear section crumpled like paper. The plane skidded for hundreds of feet before finally lurching to a stop. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then came the groans, the coughing, the sound of seatbelts unfastening. Lila's vision swam, but she could see Milo 2 rows ahead, blood trickling from his forehead. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled. Behind them, the rear half of the aircraft was broken open. Its jagged metal frame twisted, revealing the storm outside. In the darkness beyond, passengers scrambled toward the broken exit, some crawling, some stumbling, their coughing lost in the roar of the storm. She reached Milo, who was trying to pull his seatbelt free. It was jammed. With a sharp tug, she managed to snap the latch open, and they staggered toward the opening where the fuselage had split apart. Outside, the sand whipped against their faces like knives. The wind carried the smell of burning plastic, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Around them, some survivors lay motionless. Lila covered her mouth with her sleeve, forcing herself to move despite the dizziness in her head. Unmoving, the desert wind carried the smell of burning fuel. And then, the fire started. Flames licked the torn metal at the rear of the plane, feeding hungrily on leaking fuel. The heat spread fast, turning the dry desert air into an oven. Smoke rolled into the cabin, thick and choking. Lila's stomach twisted as her eyes fell on the still bodies of those who hadn't made it. Friends, families, strangers who had been laughing hours ago. A loud bang shook the wreckage as a section of the wing exploded, sending debris raining down. The heat was unbearable now, the flames consuming what was left of the cabin interior. Milo grabbed Lila's arm, pulling her farther from the wreckage. When they finally stopped, they were several meters away, standing on uneven sand. Lila's ears rang, her thoughts scattered. The storm had not let up. Wind whipped her hair into her eyes, and the dunes around them seemed to shift and blur. They looked back at the wreck. Most of it was engulfed, a twisted skeleton of glowing metal. There would be no going back for supplies. And just like that, the reality set in. They were alive, but stranded in an endless desert. The storm eased only slightly, enough for the sand to settle into a restless hiss across the dunes. Milo and Lila stood in silence, staring at the wreckage. The fire had mostly burned itself out, leaving a blackened skeleton of metal. There was no sound now except the wind. No engines, no voices, no distant rescue. Milo's first thought was food and water. They moved cautiously toward the less damaged section of the fuselage, keeping an eye on the unstable debris. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of melted plastic. Most supplies had been destroyed in the crash or burned in the fire. After nearly an hour of searching, they managed to find 2 half-crushed bottles of water and a small plastic bag containing a few protein bars. "That's it?" Lila asked, disbelief in her voice. "That's it," Milo said grimly. 2 days if we're careful. The truth was heavier than the sand beneath their feet. They were injured. Milo's forehead was still bleeding, and Lila's ribs ached with every breath. And now they knew they would have to survive in a place where food and water were scarce, maybe non-existent. As they stepped outside, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes. The desert air turned colder, sharp against their skin. The heat of the day was vanishing quickly, replaced by the icy bite of night. "We can't stay too close to the wreck," Milo said. "If the fuel tank explodes again." His voice trailed off. They began walking, each step sinking into the sand. Behind them, the wreck lay silent, a reminder of what they had escaped and what they had lost. 2 days of food, no compass, no sign of rescue. The desert felt endless. The next morning, the sun rose like a burning coin over the horizon, blinding in its intensity. Milo and Lila started walking early, hoping to cover ground before the heat became unbearable. The desert was silent except for the crunch of their footsteps in the sand. The wreck was now a distant shape, shrinking behind them until it vanished entirely. They had no compass, no clear direction. Milo tried to use the sun's position to guess a path, but the shifting dunes made everything look the same. Each ridge revealed only more sand, stretching endlessly. By midday, the heat was suffocating. Their water was warm, almost hot, but still precious. Lila took the smallest sip she could manage, letting it roll slowly over her tongue before swallowing. They shared half a protein bar, each bite tasting like dust. The injuries slowed them. Milo's forehead wound had dried into a stiff crust, but his right leg throbbed with every step. Lila's ribs made it hard to breathe deeply. They didn't speak much. Conserving energy was more important than conversation. As the day dragged on, heat shimmered over the dunes, bending light into strange mirages. Once, Lila swore she saw water in the distance, but when they reached the spot, there was only sand. By sunset, exhaustion pressed down like a weight. The temperature dropped rapidly, the desert trading heat for a bone-deep chill. Milo gathered what little brush he could find to start a small fire. They huddled close, their shadows flickering on the sand. Above them, the stars came out one by one, impossibly bright in the moonless sky. Lila looked at them and whispered, "Someone has to be looking for us, right?" Milo didn't answer. The fire crackled weakly, giving off more light than warmth. The desert night was colder than either of them expected, the kind of cold that seeped through skin into bone. Milo and Lila sat shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in the thin emergency blanket they had salvaged from the wreck. The stars overhead looked close enough to touch, yet so far they might as well have been painted on the black sky. They had chosen a slight hollow between two dunes for shelter, hoping it would block the wind. Still, sand whispered over the edges, carried by the restless air. Every sound felt amplified in the stillness. The faint hiss of the fire, the distant cry of some unseen animal, and their own shallow breathing. Hunger gnawed at them. They split another protein bar, forcing themselves to chew slowly, but it did little to ease the ache in their stomachs. "We'll find something tomorrow," Milo said, though his voice carried little conviction. Lila tried to rest, curling against the blanket, but the sand beneath her was hard and cold. Sleep came in short bursts, each one broken by shivers or the shifting of the wind. At one point, she woke to see Milo staring out at the dunes, his face lit faintly by the dying fire. "What is it?" she whispered. "Nothing, just thinking," he replied, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. By dawn, the fire had gone out completely, leaving only a pile of gray ash. The sun rose quickly, and with it came the heavy realization they were weaker than the day before, and their food supply was now dangerously low. The desert didn't care. It stretched in every direction, endless and indifferent. The sun was already climbing when they set out again, its heat pressing down like an invisible hand. Milo and Lila walked in silence, scanning the ground for anything edible. Roots, berries, even insects. The desert offered almost nothing. The few scattered bushes they found were dry and brittle, their branches sharp enough to cut skin. By midday, their throats burned with thirst. Lila's lips had cracked, and every word she spoke hurt. Still, she pointed toward a tall dune in the distance. From the top, maybe we can see something. It was harder to climb than it looked. The sand shifted underfoot, each step sliding back half the distance. Milo reached the top first, breathing heavily, sweat darkening his shirt. Lila was only a few steps behind when her foot sank deep into the loose sand. She lost her balance, stumbled, and then the slope gave way beneath her. "Lila!" Milo shouted, scrambling after her. She tumbled down the dune, rolling over and over, sand filling her clothes and hair. At the bottom, she landed hard, a sharp cry escaping her lips. Milo slid down beside her, his hands shaking as he checked her leg. A deep gash ran across her shin, blood already soaking through the torn fabric. She winced as he touched it. "It's fine," she tried to say, but her voice trembled. Milo ripped a strip from his shirt and wrapped it tightly around the wound, tying it into a makeshift bandage. "We can't keep pushing like this," he said quietly. They rested in the shadow of the dune for a while, the air around them still and heavy. The only thing they could see in every direction was more desert. But somewhere out there, they had to believe there was a way out. By late afternoon, the endless dunes began to change. The sand grew darker, patches of dry grass appearing between the ridges. Milo noticed small clusters of shrubs, their leaves tough and waxy, clinging to life. The air smelled different here, less dry, carrying a faint earthy scent. Lila leaned on him as they walked, her injured legs slowing their pace. She was pale from pain and exhaustion, but when the first tree appeared on the horizon, her eyes lit up. It wasn't much, a twisted, stunted thing, but it meant they were leaving the worst of the open desert. By evening, they reached the fringe of what could almost be called a jungle. Low trees and thick bushes tangled together, their branches rustling in the warm wind. It was nothing like the lush green forests they knew, but here, at least, there was shade. Milo searched the undergrowth and found a cluster of small, oval fruits, pale green and spotted. He held one up, unsure. "You think it's safe?" Lila shrugged. "If it kills us, at least we won't starve first." They split one fruit, tasting cautiously. It was sour, but juicy, and didn't burn their throats or make them gag. Hunger won over caution. They ate slowly, saving the rest for later. That night, they built another small fire, this time with dried branches from the trees. The sounds of the jungle were strange, distant animal calls, the rustle of unseen movement. It was unnerving, but it also meant they weren't entirely alone in this place. Lila looked up at the stars through the gaps in the leaves. "We're closer to something," she murmured. Milo nodded, though he didn't know if that something would save them or kill them. Morning brought a thin mist clinging to the trees, softening the edges of the jungle. Milo and Lila pressed on, their pace slow but steady. The ground here was firmer than the sand, littered with dry leaves and fallen branches. The air was cooler, but the thick undergrowth made it harder to see far ahead. It was Lila who spotted it first, a flash of silver through the tangle of branches. She froze, narrowing her eyes. "Milo, do you see that?" They pushed through the foliage and the shape became clear. It was another airplane, smaller than the one they had been on, lying at a strange angle against a rise of earth. Its metal skin was scratched and weathered, half swallowed by creeping vines. The cockpit glass was shattered, the interior gutted, but the fuselage still stood mostly intact. Milo climbed in through a jagged tear in the side. Inside, the air was stale and smelled faintly of rust. "Anything?" Lila called from outside. He rummaged through the debris, finding old supply crates, most empty or rotted. But in one corner, under a collapsed seat, was a dusty emergency beacon. He pulled it free, his hands trembling. "This might still work," he said, though doubt laced his voice. The device was dented, and when he tried to turn it on, nothing happened. He shook it, tapped it, tried again. The faint red light blinked once, then died. Lila's shoulders slumped. "So close." "We'll fix it," Milo said. forcing determination into his voice. They stayed by the wreck that night, hoping the beacon might somehow pick up a signal. In the darkness, the old plane looked like a ghost, a reminder that survival wasn't guaranteed here.